Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the City Library. As you know that we are celebrating Black History Month. And we are also celebrating today 10th year of the birthday of the library. 10th anniversary of the City Library's birthday. Okay. So with all these, we have a wonderful speaker, came from Colombia, Dr. Jamal Joseph. And he will be introduced by one of the professor, Dr. Wilfred Samuels from University of Utah. And probably some of you, or most of you know him very well. But before we go there, I would like to introduce Michelle Patrick, who is an artistic director of People's Production, one of the African American theater group in Salt Lake City, Utah. And Michelle Patrick is going to introduce Professor Wilfred Samuels, and Dr. Samuels then will introduce our keynote speaker. So I request Michelle Patrick to come to the stage. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you all so much for attending this very special evening tonight. We are so proud and honored to have Jamal Joseph with us this evening. This event is sponsored by the Friends of the City Library, the Office of the Vice President for Equity, Diversity, and the Ethnic Studies Program at the University of Utah. Dr. Wilfred Samuels is currently a full-time professor of English and Ethnic Studies at the University of Utah, and the former director of its African American Studies program and the coordinator of the Ethnic Studies program. Dr. Samuels is the founding president of the African American Literature and Cultural Society of the American Literature Association, which he headed for 10 years. He has lectured in England, Scotland, Africa, Japan, and throughout Southeast Asia. A former Ford Foundation postdoctoral fellow, Dr. Samuels is the recipient of several awards that include the University of Utah's Distinguished Teaching Award, the College of Humanities Ramona Cannon Award for Teaching Excellence, and the Student's Choice Award. He is the recipient of Salt Lake City's Utah NAACP's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Award, the University of Utah's Diversity Award, the ALA Distinguished Service Award, and most recently, the University of Utah Black Student Living Legacy Award. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please help me welcome Dr. Wilfred D. Samuels.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm waiting for a response. You saw the guest for the night. He's African American. You heard that beautiful introduction. She's African American. I'm standing in front of you. I'm African American. And our culture is oral and call and response. So, good evening. Good evening. There you go. There you go. Now I feel better. You're in for a treat. Thank you. Let me join Michelle in thanking you for coming to this very special event. I've lived in Salt Lake City, Utah for 25 years. And I don't celebrate 1 month of African American history and culture. I celebrate 12 months.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I'm a professor of English and an Americanist, and for me that means that what I do with African American literature, history, and culture is celebrating the African American experience. I saw the public biography that, and I call him Dr. Jamal Joseph, not just Professor Joseph. I have no problems with the fact that there's not a PhD or EDD or a JLD. He has earned all of those degrees just in the life that he has lived. And as you listen to him tonight, you will see that he has earned every degree because he's lived life to its fullest. And if you've read the poster, you saw that he was a Panther baby. He grew up, as I did, during the late 60s and the early 70s. But he grew up in an urban center in New York. As a result of some of his early experiences, he was incarcerated. In fact, he was imprisoned a total of almost a decade, 10 years. He's a former drug abuser. And, as I said, an urban kid. The narrative is definitely a familiar one. After all, I had read the autobiography of Malcolm X. I had read Man-Child in the Promised Land. And I had read David McCall's Makes Me Want to Holler. The wonderful things about those works, those texts, and Dr. Jamal's life is that the story does not end there. If you take time to read carefully and to listen carefully, what you will discover is that these individuals have lived full lives with all of the challenges that life could possibly present for them. And consequently, their life story is a story, a narrative of a journey from absence, liminality, and alienation to personal fulfillment, wholeness, and community. When I met Dr. Jamal last night at the airport and took him to dinner, the biography that I just recited had little or no meaning to me. What he meant to me was that his life crystallized, personified for me one of my favorite poems by Langston Hughes. And it's the poem in which the mother says to her son, "Life for me ain't been no crystal stairs. It's had tacks in it and splinters and boards torn up and places with no carpet on the floor." That is Jamal's life. But again, like his own personal life, the mother doesn't stop there. At the end of the poem, she says, "So boy, don't you sit down on the step because you find it's kind of hard. Don't you stop till eyes are still climbing. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair." That was last night. Today, when he spoke at the university, he personified another Hughes poem, "Hold fast to dreams, for without dreams life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly." And then, above all, given our generation, I came to see him as a message that I learned some 40 years ago from the Black Arts Poet, in which its architects merely demanded that speakers who speak for us as Black people do one thing, and that is speak the truth to the people. So tonight, I'm not going to introduce to you a professor at Columbia, a former drug addict, a former prisoner. I want to introduce to you a griot, a historian, a poet of our culture, a village elder, an inspirational speaker, and above all, as of today, my new lifelong friend, Dr. Jamal Joseph. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that introduction. There's another used poem that I know a lot of people love, and Dr. Samuels, you'll probably remember this as Langston Hughes, one of his greatest poems, but his shortest poem, and it goes very simply, I wish the rent was heaven sent. Which reminds me of a story of two homeless guys, black guys in New York City, who were there years ago when the Pope visited, and the Pope was coming out of the Waldorf Astoria, and they were there trying to get some change, and all of a sudden the Pope comes out, and Panther has on a big hat, and he gets into the Pope-mobile, and he rides off. And one guy was named Bo, and he looked at the other guy named Jack, and he said, Bo, who's that white cat with that crazy hat on, baby? Jack said, that was the Pope, fool. He said, don't you know anything? He says, I know stuff. He says, you just ignorant, fool. You don't know anything. He says, I know things. He said, you're ignorant. He said, you are so ignorant, I will bet you a bottle of wine that I can ask myself a question and can answer it. And you can ask yourself a question and can't answer it. Bo said, well, I can answer my own question. I'll bet the bottle of wine. Jack said, okay. Question. How can a rabbit dig a hole and not leave any dirt around the side? Answer, he starts at the bottom. Bo said, how can a rabbit dig a hole? He starts at the bottom. How did he get to the bottom? Jack said, that's your question, fool, you answer. So we do live in a time of questions. And there's some questions that we should ask ourselves, a lot of the questions that we should be asking are questions for us to answer. And I don't mean to be mysterious about this, but we talk about, I've had a lot of conversations since I've been in Salt Lake, and it's a conversation that spans states and places of learning to community centers, and that is what's happening with our young people. I've had this conversation last night with Dr. Samuels, with people that I've met. What is going on with our young people? Of course it comes up in New York, and I've been all across the country talking about Panther Baby. And this is a great question. And one of the reasons why I wrote the book, Panther Baby, is because not only have adults had this question, saying we were so inspired in the 60s. There was so much that happened, and that was a youth-driven rebellion. There was youth-driven consciousness. There was youth-driven activism. What happened to our young people? But that's not the thing that really motivated me. Although I had done a lot of writing, although I had written volumes of poetry and screenplays that had been produced, and written a book about Tupac Shakur, I still didn't write the story because, you'll tell stories over dinner or in a lecture, and people go, that's fascinating, you should write a book. But sometimes the body that we reside in, the skin that we're in, it doesn't seem that interesting to us because we wake up in this body, in this skin every morning. But it was the young people that I've had a chance to meet in high schools and in colleges and in community centers, that when I would tell some of these stories and that they understood that I was 15 years old when I joined the Black Panther Party, 13 years old when I joined the movement, because I first joined the NAACP Youth Council, they would say, what was that like? And they would say, what was it like in the way that if you had told someone, I got to play in a high school basketball tournament in Madison Square Garden when I was 17, people go, Madison Square Garden, 17? What was that like? And they meant, what was the energy like? What did it feel like? What did it sound like? What did it taste like? What was it like for you in that place in that time? Because I want to know. Because I have this question, what is it like to be realized as a young person. And so, with the questions coming from those young people and the young people in Impact Repertory Theater, a youth program that I run in New York, I sat down and began to write the story known as Panther Baby. I'd like to read from the book, and this is a little bit of chapter 3, which is called Finding the Panther Lair. I walked into a Panther office in Brooklyn in September 1968. Dr. King had been assassinated in April of that year. Riots and anger flared in ghettos around the country. The feeling on the street was that the stuff was about to hit the fan. Black power was the phrase of the day. And hating whitey was the cool thing to do. From the street corner speeches to campus rallies, whitey had gone from being the man to being the beast. Young black students were trading in their feel-good Motown records for the recorded speeches of Malcolm X and the angry jazz recordings of Ornette Coleman. I went down to 125th Street in Harlem the night Dr. King was assassinated. Protesters and rioters swarmed the streets, clashing with cops, overturning cars, setting trash can fires, and hurling bricks at white-owned businesses. One of the storefront windows was shattered by an airborne trash can. Looters ran into the store, started taking clothes, appliances, and whatever else they could carry. Not everyone looted. In fact, most of the crowd continued to chant, "The king is dead," and "Black power," but it was enough for the cops to start swinging clubs, shooting their pistols, and making arrests. A cop grabbed me and threw me against the wall. Before he could handcuff me and put me in the paddy wagon, a group of rioters across the street turned a police car over. The cop told me to stay put and ran toward the rioters. I was scared, but I wasn't stupid. I took off running in the opposite direction. I blended in with a group of rioters and tried to figure out which way to go. A group of cops headed toward us. Some of the rioters ran into a clothing store that was being looted. I followed. The cops entered the store swinging clubs and making arrests. My heart pounded as I ran into the back of the store and found a door leading to an alley. I gasped for air as I ran down the alley and was stopped by a wooden fence. The cops came into the alley. "Halt," they yelled. "Put your hands up." In my mind, I froze, put my hands in the air, and turned around to face the cops with tears in my eyes. But my body kept hauling butt. I grabbed the fence and scurried over the top like a scared alley cat. 2 shots rang out. One splintered the wood on the fence near my butt. This gave me the fear, adrenaline push I needed to flip over, pick myself up off the ground, and scramble out of the alley. When I turned out onto the street, I kept running right past 2 other cops who tried to grab me, but I jerked away, turning the corner. I almost collided with a group of 20 or so black men in leather coats and army fatigue jackets, wearing afros and berets, standing on the corner in military-like formation. "Stop running, young brother." One of the men with a beard and tinted glasses said, "Don't give these pigs an excuse to gun you down." I doubled over, heaving, trying to catch my breath. I didn't know this man, but his voice sounded like a rap of confidence in a sea of chaos. Moments later, 2 cops ran around the alley. They stopped in their tracks when they saw the militant men. The men closed ranks around them. "What are you doing here?" one of the cops demanded. "Move aside." The black man with the tinted glasses didn't flinch. "We're exercising our constitutional right to free assembly. Making sure no innocent people get killed out here tonight." "We're chasing looters," the cop retorted. "No looters here. As you can see, we're a disciplined community patrol." "You have guns?" the cop asked, a tinge of fear in his voice. "That's what you said," the man with tinted glasses replied. "I said, we're exercising our constitutional rights." The cops took in the size and the discipline of the group for a moment and walked away. By this time, I caught my breath, but I was speechless from what I had just seen. Black men standing down white cops. "Go straight home, young brother," the man with tinted glasses said. "The pigs are looking for any excuse to murder black folks tonight." With that, the black men walked on. I scooted down to the subway and rode home. When I entered the apartment, Noonie, my adopted grandmother, was sitting on the couch watching images of Dr. King on TV. Tears fell from her eyes. She didn't even ask me where I had been, which was unusual, because I was about 2 hours late getting home. I sat next to her, put my arm around her, and we watched the TV reports of the assassination and the riots. The next day, I went to school, and I announced to my friends that, my friends that I normally had lunch with, and I was a hall monitor, so there was a group of us that always ate together. I announced to my friends with boldness and conviction that I, Eddie Joseph, was going to be a black militant. And one of my best friends was a kid named Paul Kirshner, white kid, a Jewish kid. And he looked at me and he said, Eddie, I don't think you can announce you're going to be a black militant like it's a career choice. Like you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer. And I was like, no, Paul, you watch, I'm going to be a black militant. So as much to prove to Paul as to myself, I had to find the most militant group on the scene. And as I'm trying to figure out, because I'd only seen images of Stokely Carmichael on television and H. Rap Brown, one day there was a news report that came on evening news about the Panther Party. To give a little history for folks that don't know, the Panthers started in Oakland, California in 1966 by two young men, college students, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, who began to patrol the streets of Oakland, California with shotguns and law books. Now, the reason why this was is because in the black communities in Oakland, California, Chicago, Mississippi, Atlanta, Harlem, it was standard operational procedure for the cops to smack you around whenever they stopped you. Standard. You expected it. It was in the job description. The cops would knock you around. I remember being about 10 or 11 years old and climbing over a fence and sneaking into a public park that had been closed and playing basketball with a couple of other young friends, and white cops coming in, asking us what the heck we were doing on the basketball court. It was closed. And whatever we said, they said, get home. They used more choice language than that. And they took their nightsticks and they began to chase us out of the park by whipping us across our backs and our legs. And we ran out the park. And we ran around the corner, and when we caught our breath, we saw that one of our friends, Roger, was crying. And our reaction to our friend crying was to tease him. Oh man, you crying? You're a bum. We had been so programmed that this was the part of life in the black community that we weren't able to process the fact that we had just been assaulted by a police officer, that we had been abused, that we had been beaten up by someone who had taken a solemn oath to serve and protect. Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, Huey had been a pre-law student, said we're going to make a dynamic show that this is not correct. And so they began to carry shotguns and rifles, which were legal in California if they weren't concealed, and law books so that they could stand a legal distance away and read to the person being arrested their rights, but also let the cops know that they had a right to observe, and if the cops tried to approach them, they had a right to defend themselves. They would follow that person to the police station, they would bail them out, and if they didn't have the bail or if the charges were more serious, there were a group of young progressive lawyers who were standing by as volunteers to represent folks who couldn't afford a lawyer. One would think that in 1966 this was a dangerous thing to do, that you were living in a country where Malcolm X had been killed and Emmett Till had been murdered, and freedom riders had a bus blown up, and civil rights workers, both black and white, were being attacked by fire hoses and cattle prods and police dogs, but they stood up. And the response of the community was not only to cheer and applaud that, but the ranks of the Panther Party grew. Across California, across the country, and in New York City. I watched the news report that night, not quite sure what I was saying. These men stormed into the Capitol, it was national news, and they said the ultra-militant Black Panther Party stormed into the state capitol of Sacramento to protest the change in the gun laws. Because of the Panthers, they decided, maybe everybody can't carry a gun. And when they went into the hallway, the legislatures, these powerful men who were used to running things in California, looked and saw these militant black men with berets enter the chamber, and they did exactly what powerful leaders who were used to not being questioned would do in a situation like that. They scrambled for cover. And there was a reporter saying the Panthers were stopped, one of their vehicles was stopped, and there were guns in the trunk of the car, and revolutionary literature, and communist literature. And I'm looking at the TV going, they're crazy. They got on leather coats, they're carrying guns. The man says they're communists, they're crazy, I want to join that one. I'm 15 years old. And they were militant. Well, we didn't know where the Panther office was, and two of my older friends got the address to what we thought was the secret headquarters of the Black Panther Party. I lived in the Bronx, and it was in Brooklyn, and the train ride was almost 90 minutes. And as we're riding out there, we were talking about what we're getting into, and I, being the youngest one, was sitting in the middle, and one of my friends leaned over, and he says, yo, man, you know the Panthers is like the mafia. Once you join, you can't get out. Can't get out? But I couldn't be a punk in front of my boys, so I kind of just squared my shoulders, and I went, I don't care. Another guy leans over and he says, hey man, you know you gotta kill a white dude to be a Panther. Kill somebody? I'm an honor student. I'm a choir boy in the church. I'm in the Boy Scout Cadet Corps, but I can't be a punk in front of my boys. I don't care. My other friend said, no, man, you ain't gotta kill a white dude. Oh, thank God, I'm so glad I don't have to kill somebody. He said, you gotta kill a white cop. And you have to bring in his badge and his gun. Well, we get to the Panther office, and there's that Black Panther Party logo on the outside, and all these young Panthers with their leather coats and their army fatigue jackets and their berets, and I sit in the back of the room looking at these cool older men and women, these cool Panthers. Now keep in mind, I'm 15 years old, but looking back, they weren't that much older. They were 19, 20, 21, 22. The average age of someone in the movement in the Panther Party at that time was about 20 years old. Behind the desk was a young information lieutenant who was explaining the Panther 10-point program. We want freedom. We want the power to determine the destiny of our community, point number one. We want decent housing fit for shelter for human beings. We want full employment for our people. We want to end to the robbery by the businessmen of our community. Nothing in the 10-point program about killing white folks, bringing a cop's badge and gun. What was I hearing this? I had my own conversation. I'm going to be a Panther, I'm going to be a man, I'm going to be a Panther. So I jump up, point number 5, which is simply about education. We want an education that teaches us our true history and the true nature of American society. And I jump up and I said, choose me, brother, pardon me, I'll kill a white dude right now. The whole meeting stops. The man behind the desk says, come here, young brother. And I walk up and I'm standing beside his desk. And he reaches down into the bottom drawer after looking me over from head to toe. And as he reaches into the bottom drawer, my heart is pounding in my chest, and I'm thinking to myself, look how far out he's reaching in that drawer, he's going to give me a big old gun. And he hands me the secret weapon of the Panther Party and of the movement. He gave me a stack of books. Autobiography of Malcolm X, Soul and Acts by Eldridge Cleaver, Wretched and Earth by Franz Fanon, Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr., the famous Little Red Book, quotations from Chairman Mao. And I'm standing here and I'm thinking of all the stuff that I had heard on the train, and I'm thinking, this must be a test. This has got to be a test. And so I'm there, and I'm 15 years old, and I'm thin as a rail, and I have one of the 1960s, Jackson 5 afro. And not only did I have the Jackson 5 afro, my voice hadn't quite changed, so I sounded like Michael. But I knew this had to be a test, so I cleared my throat, and I deepened my voice an octave, and I looked this man in the eye holding my books, and I said, excuse me, brother, I thought you were going to arm me. And he said, excuse me, young brother, I just did. And as I was walking to my seat, he said, young brother, let me ask you a question. And I stopped. He said, you came in real angry talking about you wanted to kill a white dude. He said, I need to ask you a question. If all of the cops in the community that are beating people up, shooting people down, locking people up, if all of them were black, and the people being brutalized and arrested were white, if all of the people who own these stores in the community that are ripping the community off with high prices, spoiled vegetables, rotten meat, if all of those shopkeepers were black, and the people being ripped off were white, he said, in these job time, capitalist, racist, fascist politicians, we were colorful in the Panthers. He said, but if all of them, everybody in control was black, and the people being exploited and oppressed were white, would that make things correct? And I thought at this time he answered with my brain instead of my ego, and I said, no, sir, it seems like it would still be wrong. And he said, that's right, brother. Understand that this is a class struggle for human rights, not just a race struggle for civil rights. Study those books so you know what this revolution is all about. That was the first day in the Panther office. The second day in the Panther office, I came and they pulled me to the side and they said, are you still ready for that secret mission? I'm like, yeah. And they said, well, tomorrow morning, meet us at 5:30 in the morning. They gave me the address of a street corner in Harlem. And I snuck out the house a little bit early, and I bundled up, and I waited on the street corner, and some Panthers came, and they led me inside the community center that was in the church basement. And my secret weapon that day was a pancake spatula. And we cooked breakfast for kids in the community. One of the Panthers' main programs, if you read about the history of the Black Panther program, was the free breakfast program for kids. Because the Panthers expanded that 10-point program. Point number 7 was we wanted an end to police brutality and the murder of black people in the community. But they realized when you talked about problems that were facing the community, when you're talking about organizing people and raising consciousness, that you have to organize people around their needs. One of the things that Bobby Seale said early on in the Panther movement, as I look out at some of the families and the children in the audience, was that kids going to schools in the inner city were not doing well. People said our kids are unruly and that they can't learn. And a lot of the Panthers who were parents realized, you know, it's hard for a kid to go to school and sit in a classroom learning basic arithmetic, listening to a teacher saying 3 apples plus 2 apples equal 5 apples, and they're hungry, their stomachs are growling. You've got to organize people around their basic needs. So when we talk about concepts of liberation and class struggle and all of this is great stuff. But for someone who is hungry, freedom is food. For someone who is sleeping on the street or huddling in the back of the van with their family, liberation is a safe, warm, dry place to sleep. And most of your work in the Panther Party was working in those community programs. No money, but a lot of spirit of wanting to transform the community. You would go to a church or you go to a community center. And you'd ask the people who ran it, can you use their dining room and their kitchen? Then you go to shopkeepers in the community and you'd ask somebody, will you give me a case of cereal every week? The person who owns the store up in the avenue is giving us a case of eggs. The other person down the street is giving us a case of milk. If you'll give us some cereal or some pancake mix, we can feed some of the kids in this community. We don't want money. And within a week, we'd open a breakfast program, put out a flyer, there's no shortage of hungry kids in any poor community. Within a week, you'd be feeding 50 kids. Within a month, it would be hundreds of kids. The Panthers had a free health clinic. I was in the hospital about 7 weeks ago. I got a hip replacement. That's why I'm still walking a little stiff. And I signed the patient bill of rights that I think a lot of us take for granted, that we should be informed. And I was reminded that there were times in the community where people would bring their kids to the Panther office because they were being turned away from emergency rooms. A mother comes into the Panther office with her daughter who was trembling and screaming in pain, who was 7 years old, who had sickle cell anemia. It's a very painful blood disorder for people of African American, of African and Caribbean descent. It's genetic. It's not something that can be transmitted. And when you're in crisis, your red blood cells begin to bind up and blood is not flowing and you have pain all through your body. And this child is trembling, saying that the doctors in the hospital had sent her away with some aspirin, saying that her daughter was having a psychosomatic illness. Well, 15 minutes later, that emergency room was filled with 50 Black Panthers. And a Panther lieutenant holding that baby said, treat this child right now, or there might be a psychosomatic riot in this emergency room. But beyond that show of force, what the Panthers began to do was on Saturdays and Sundays was to turn the Panther office into a health clinic. Again, with no money. We would get people who were medical students and doctors and nurses and ask them to give up their days off and to bring some medical supplies and treat people in the community. Because we understood that in the struggle, there would be some people who were community organizers, some people might want to be frontline like the Panthers, but that everyone had a job that they could do to raise consciousness and help the community. That teachers could teach, that doctors could heal, that lawyers could take up the causes of social justice, that carpenters and plumbers, when Panthers helped organize rent strikes and help deal with buildings that were infested with rats and with roaches and where the ceilings were falling in, that we could go in and help people rebuild those houses. And that was your work, and that was the grassroots organization. When J. Edgar Hoover went in front of the Congress in 1968 to get more funding, to do more surveillance on the Black Panther Party, a program that was called the Counterintelligence Program, he cited the Black Panther Party as the most dangerous threat to the internal security of America. Sound familiar? These are words that are thrown around quite frequently in our government. When a group of people or a group of activists are branded a certain way. Or even worse, when a group of law-abiding citizens are branded a certain way. When we look at a class, when we look at a color, when we look at religious background and decide those peoples are enemies of the state, and politicians can stand up and testify and bring out charts and bring out diagrams and rattle a saber and create fear among the populace and funding with their colleagues. But the thing that bothered J. Edgar Hoover the most wasn't the rhetoric of the Panther Party that talked about revolution. Wasn't that the Panthers in certain cities where you could carry guns would do community patrols, and in cities where they couldn't carry guns would do community patrols, keeping communities safe that police refused to go in. It was the free breakfast program. That's what bothered him the most. That some organization would dare to do what the city and what the schools weren't doing, was to feed kids and to give them books. And to talk about their legacy and to talk about what they could be, how they could reach their full potential. What the Counterintelligence Program did was do more than observe. It waged a secret war in the Civil Rights Movement. There are books about COINTELPRO. It talks about informers around Malcolm X, around Martin Luther King, the American Indian Movement, and the Black Panther Party. I opened the book talking about a Panther officer who I looked up to, someone named Yewa Sudan. And Yewa was a Marine Corps veteran, a really handsome man, a muscular man. Taught me everything about being in Panther. I opened the book and talking about chapter 1, how I was blindfolded in a Panther safe house, learning how to take apart a gun and put it together by touch. Yewa not only taught me about weapons and hand-to-hand combat, how to make pancakes, he even taught me the right way to rap to a young girl in the Panthers, a Panther teenager. I was standing in the Panther office one day, I had on my leather coat, I had been in there, I'm 15 years old, and a young Panther sister who was about 17 walks by, and I said, "What's happening, baby?" Yeah, I see some of the women nodding already. She wheeled on me. She said, "First of all, brother, the revolution is happening, and my name is not baby." I walked away. Oh boy. Yeah, okay, I dare. Let's get applause for that. For the women. Faye Shakur pulls me aside, Tupac's mom. And she said, "Jamal, what are you doing?" She said, "If you want someone in the struggle And if you want someone in the Panther Party to pay attention to you, sisters don't care about all that slick stuff that you're learning from the guys on the street corner. If you want to impress somebody in the Black Panther Party, you have to be a hard worker. You have to do it for real. So that the next time when you meet a sister, first of all, you don't say, what's happening, baby? You say, all power to the people, my sister. That was our greeting in the Panther Party. All power to the people. And the crowd would say, power to the people. And the Panthers would say, that means black power for black people. And people would say, right on. And we would say, that means white power for white people. And that means brown power for brown people. Yellow power for yellow people. Red power for red people. People go, white power for white people. Yeah, people, the Panthers would say, if you talk about what's going on in the country, don't have power. When there are more white people on welfare than there are black people, when people are being exploited and oppressed all across the country, when we have rights and issues that deal with women and deal with immigrants and deal with people making different choices, we're talking about all power to all the people, not divide and conquer. We're talking about the small quantity of the haves oppressing the have-nots. So you got to say, how to the people, my sister? And then when she says, right on, brother, how are you? And then you have to say, and you have to mean it because it's true. Well, my sister, you see, I'm really tired. I was up at 5 o'clock this morning working in the breakfast program. Then from there, I was organizing in my school. Then from there, I put in a couple of hours in the health clinic. Then from there, I did community patrol. Then from there, I was backing the Panther paper so we could go out and sell it tomorrow. Sister, it's about 10 o'clock at night. I've been exhausted, but guess what? I'm going to sleep about 3 or 4 hours. I'm going to do it again because I'm a good brother in the struggle. And then she said, the sister might say, well, brother, in between all that struggling, why don't you stop by for a little dinner? Maybe. Well, I'm on the go so much, actually keeping this promise and being a good young brother in the struggle, that I'm barely keeping up with my chores. And Grandma is saying, boy, when are you going to clean the room? When are you going to trim the hedges? When are you going to fix that light? My adopted grandfather had died a few years earlier, and I never knew my dad. And I would always make excuses. I'm going to the meeting, I'm going to school. This early, I have an activity. This late, but I'm being a Panther. So she did what a lot of parents and grandparents did. Finally got tired of seeing my room a mess, went in there to start to clean. Went under to change my sheets, and in between the mattress and the box spring, where most teenage boys keep, you know, their children in the room, but you know. She pulls out all of this Black Panther information. I'm talking about the Panther papers, all of these books, and if you look online or if you've ever gone to the exhibits, those Panther newspapers had some things that are collectible art then, but really shocking stuff to people that weren't Panthers in those days. The police would be portrayed as pigs with flies buzzing around their head. School children would be going to school with books on one hand, barefoot African school children, AK-47s on the other. Revolution in our lifetime would be the headline. And Grandma was a good religious church woman. Her parents had been slaves. And I came in and set up on the kitchen table was a stack of Panther newspapers, was the Holy Bible, and a belt. All she had to do was light a candle, and that would have looked like a mafia altar. I came in and I froze in my tracks. And she said, boy, what is this? And I said, Grandma, you was in my room. She said, don't even start. She said, what is this mess here? She said, because right now, I don't know whether to bless you with this belt or kill you with this Bible. I tried to explain, there was no explaining. She forbid me to go back to the Panthers. Obedient grandson that I was, I went back one more time. And that was to let Afeni Shakur and her husband Lumumba and Yewa, who was my section leader, that was like my sergeant, let them know that I could not come back anymore because my grandmother had violated my rights, searched my room, and tripping like she was some kind of Uncle Tom. Well, Afeni almost jumped in my chest with 2 feet. She said, never talk about your grandmother like that. Understand the generation and the time that she comes from, and that you haven't been completely honest, and that she's trying to love you and protect you the best way she knows how. Well, my section leader volunteered to come to the house. He showed up. He had on his Panther leather jacket, but none of the Panther buttons. He had on a tie. I didn't even know we were allowed to wear ties. He greeted her. Grandma was named Jessie Mae Baltimore. She was from North Carolina. And he said, good evening, Mother Baltimore. Oh, he got some points because she was an elder in the church. We sit down. He's drinking coffee, eating some of Grandma's pound cake. And he said, Mother Baltimore, I know you said that, Jamal, excuse me, Eddie, as soon as he said that. I'm Jamal now, why you call me by my slave name? But I know you said he can't come back to the Panther office. He says, and ma'am, if that's the case, then we have to obey you. We need to listen because you're his grandmother, but you're my elder. If you tell me to do anything right now, I need to listen. But ma'am, I know that he's giving you a hard time. So if it's okay, even if he can't come back, I'd like to keep an eye on him. If you say his curfew is 9 o'clock, and if he's not in the door by 8:45, ma'am, I will take off this garrison belt buckle and I'll whip his butt. And I'm sitting in the side chair going, what are you doing? You're supposed to come in and do like the Panther Jedi, mind you, what are you? He said, ma'am, I know he could be doing better in school. So if you want him to bring you an 85 on the next algebra test, if he doesn't bring you a 90, I would take these size 13 combat boots and I'll give him a swift kick in the butt. And I'm on the side going, why did you even come? I'm going to be in trouble till I'm 50 now. But Grandma spoke the truth. She said, you know, it is really hard raising a young man without a father. He never knew his dad, and his grandfather passed a few years ago. And I do my best. But you seem like a good man. So if you promise to keep an eye on him, make sure he does what he's supposed to do around the house and school, that he listens to me when I ask him to do some things around the house, then I'll let him go back. And I did. And I worked really hard to kind of keep this promise. And about 6 weeks later, the doorbell rings to Grandma's house. About 4 o'clock in the morning, when I go down, police are there, and a police SWAT team kicks in the door, and 30 cops with rifles and machine guns come in, and they handcuff me. I just turned 16, and they take me away to prison. And I'm charged along with 20 other Panthers in a conspiracy case that became known as the Panther 21 case. Afeni Shakur, Tupac's mom, was part of that case, and we're charged with conspiracy to plant bombs around New York City, to attack police officers, to wage a war of terror, which seemed outrageous to us. And we had some amazing young lawyers that came. William Kunstler was the lead attorney. And as we tried to find out, and we were whisked into the courtroom, read all of these charges, and bail was set at $100,000. Which is a lot of money now, but imagine in 1969, they might as well have said $5 million. Because let me remind you who we were. We were students. We were workers. We were returning Vietnam veterans. We were people just getting out of prison. Those are the people who came to the Black Panther Party, the disenfranchised, the people who were Fanon called the wretched of the earth, people getting out of prison, coming back from the military, women, students, welfare mothers. As we tried to figure out, and we were facing 367 years. That's the kind of prison sentence that you can't serve in one time. If you believe, whether you believe in reincarnation, you know, it's the kind of sentence that if you do come back, they find you and go, oh no, you come with us, baby. You have more time to do. As we tried to figure out what the case was about, we found out that there were 2 cops who were part of an elite police unit called the Bureau of Special Services. One man had been Malcolm X's bodyguard. He was with Malcolm X when he left the Nation of Islam, when Malcolm formed the Organization of African American Unity. He was on the stage when Malcolm was shot down. He gave him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. He was an undercover cop and no one knew it. Malcolm X drew his last breath from someone who was sent to spy on him. And the other person who was part of it was my mentor. The person who came to my grandmother's house. The person who trained me. The person who made sure I got to the breakfast program on time. That was how counterintelligence worked. I came out on bail, became a spokesman for the Panther Party, and one of the youngest national spokesmen, and then went on a journey in terms of speaking for other Panthers and organizing. Eventually went back to prison, where I spent a total of 9.5 years. But when I walked in the door, it's interesting, something that had happened 15 years earlier happened to me again in the form of a prisoner who was doing life. An older black man who came to me and he said, "Young blood, you can serve this here time, or you can let this time serve you." And I reminded me of that day when I walked to the Panther office and I began spending time in the prison library. I took advantage of all the courses. They had a wonderful program. The University of Kansas came in. Dedicated professors would come in. And you had to do your work detail, but you could go to school full-time at night. And you had professors who would come in at night and make sure that we worked just as hard, if not harder, than the people on the main campus. One professor in particular was an English professor, Professor Johnson, petite white woman, about 70 years old. She's in the room by herself with men who were doing time for bank robbery, for kidnapping, for murder. And if you turned in a paper that wasn't right, Professor Johnson would mark it up and stand in front of you and say, "This is terrible, I know you could do better." And you know how the men responded? They were afraid. We would stand in the yard going, "What can we do?" One day, Professor Johnson came in with the King James Version of the Bible, and she had redlined it and found some grammatical errors. "Look at this." And we're in the back going like, "Man, she's redlining the Bible. She's got God in study hall. What do we have coming?" There was one guy named Bo. Big Bo was doing life because he had shot 2 bank guards and 2 cops. You know, he had done 7 bank robberies. He spoke in basic grunts. Big Bo was standing, he was afraid of nobody. He could knock you out with 1 punch. He was standing in the yard one day, and Big Bo was looking depressed. We said, "Bo, are you okay?" It was almost like cautiously talking to him because he had such a temper. And he was saying, "I'm all right." "Big Bo, is everything cool, man?" We knew his mother was not doing so well. "Is your mom okay?" "No, yeah, you know, my mom fine." We know he was up for parole. "Big Bo, you got bad news from the parole officer? They gave you another 10 years? "Nah, man, you know, I didn't even see the parole board yet." "Well, what's the matter, Big Bo?" "All right, man, I'm gonna tell you, man, it's Professor Johnson, man. She gave me a C, man. That's gonna mess up my whole grade right now." We learned because we understood that knowledge was power, and we learned because we had people from the outside that were unafraid to come in. They understood that if you come into a community, whether it's a poor community, whether it's a barrio, whether it's a reservation, whether it's a white slum, if you come in with love and with the right intention and with the tools of liberation, and I'm not talking about guns, I'm talking about food, I'm talking about jobs, I'm talking about love, I'm talking about opportunity that you can make a difference in people's lives. When I was in prison, the United States of America was 3rd in the world of the number of people that it had incarcerated. 3rd behind South Africa and the then Soviet Union. Now we are number 1. Over 2 million people in prison. And the programs that I availed myself of that allowed me to graduate from the University of Kansas, of KU, with honors, with not 1 but 2 degrees, to be even now an esteemed alum of KU when I go back to the campus, to allow me to pursue the path that I am as a director, as a writer, as an activist, as a poet, as an Oscar nominee, as a tenured professor, as a former chair, and a full professor at Columbia University. Those programs don't exist. Even though every indicator is that the rate of recidivism drops dramatically proportionally to the amount of education that someone gets. There's no secret to that. That people who are in prison because they are not educated and poor, don't have opportunity in the first place, can benefit from an education and then those embracing arms that can help them to become productive members of society. In Chicago last year, the murder rate topped 500. And they were talking about what to do. And they had panels. And they had people talking about what they can do about the murder rate. And a pastor who runs a church in the heart of the area where the shooting stopped saying, "We need books here, we need jobs here, we need education here, we don't need more cops." We're building more prisons, but we're not building schools. State of California last year built 1 new institution or more facilities of higher education. They built 15 new prisons. I used to say, and I've been corrected by this data, that as we speak, right now that there are more young black and brown men in prison than they are in colleges. I stand corrected in that number. There are more young black men in colleges than there are in prison. So that's encouraging news. But there are more black men in prison today in America than there were in slavery at the height of slavery in the 1800s. We have work to do. These are our brothers and our sisters. These are people who, if we had that kind of aggressive love that we heard about in the Panther Party, that were in the movement, that drove the civil rights movement, that made the freedom riders come from all over the country to protest injustice in the country, that we can be making a difference. There is an epidemic in terms of the AIDS and HIV virus. The number one target right now is young black women. We have to educate, we have to fight. The highest level of unemployment are young people in this country. We talk about that number being dissatisfied with it hovering around 7 or 8%, but that number is double and triple with young people of all colors. What are we doing for our children? We started with that question. What is that answer? Well, I came out and I was fortunate to do the work that I do in the community. And to start a theater program. I started a theater program in prison and then continued to do that work outside. And I just kind of, as I close the end, I want to leave some time for a couple of questions. I'm sitting in the yard and the same man that gave me that advice a week or two after I was in prison came up to me and he had heard, he said, "Young blood, you was in the Panthers out there, wasn't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Uh-huh." He said, "And you did karate and stuff when you were out?" "Well, that's true. I started learning karate in the Panthers and I had become a black belt." I said, "Uh-huh." He said, "And you did plays and stuff on the outside?" And I had become an actor and I was part of the Black Arts Movement, but that wasn't like common prison knowledge. So I said, "Yes." And he went, And he walked away. And I thought I was in some kind of trouble. They have this thing in prison called the convict code. And the convict code supersedes politics, gang affiliation, and it's, don't steal from another convict, don't tell on another convict, do your own time. But there's all kinds of ways that you could violate the convict code, the same way we have, 200,000 laws in America to basically help us figure out 10 commandments. There's all kinds of ways. So the next day, he comes back, and I look up and I'm reading a book, and he comes back with two of the biggest black guys in the joint. They looked like NFL linebackers, except they had bullet wounds and knife wounds. They looked like death had struck them. In fact, that was their nickname, Death and Struck. I said, "This is it. I'm going to get killed because I did plays on the outside." He said, "Young blood, about those plays." I said, "Yes." He said, "Why don't you do something for Black History Month?" I worked it out with the warden, and he walked away. So I go to the prison library, and I go to the theater section, and there's only one black play. Well, there were only two plays. It was Romeo and Juliet and Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry. And I read the play, and tears come to my eyes, not just because Lorraine Hansberry is such a wonderful playwright and plays beautiful, but there's women in the play. It's a play about a black grandmother trying to save her family. And I come back to Mr. Cody, and I said, "Mr. Cody, I don't think I can do this play. It's the only play that I found, and there's a lot of women in the play." And he looks at me, he says, "Young blood, it's cool. Just look around the yard, pick out about 5 guys, we'll put a dress on them." I was like, so I wrote a play. This is really how I became a playwright. And then he got me a rehearsal space, and he also got me my cast. Mr. Cody really wanted to be a producer. Guess what my cast was? It was Death and Struck. They had no interest in acting. But Mr. Cody said, "Do it," we did it. They didn't know how to act, so I had to teach them how to act. I didn't have much time, Michelle, so I started teaching them how to act through improvisation. We do a scene, and I'd say, "Freeze." And one guy would look at the other, and I would go, "Death, Struck, that was great. Woo, that was improvisation. Death, you looked at Struck, you said you're going to stab him 8 times. Struck, you looked at Death, you said you're going to bash his skull in with a dumbbell. And I really believed you. Woo, I was in the moment." Now, you two guys talking, when actors talk on stage, that's called dialogue. When an actor's going on and on, like I am, sounding stupid, that's called a monologue. But you guys just did dialogue. Say it, guys, dialogue.
Dialogue.
And Def looked struck me, he was like, I wasn't dialoguing. I don't like you, I'm gonna kill you. No, okay, wait, stop guys, freeze, please. Freeze, let's go back to our sensory exercise. Work with me, breathe, you're a tree. Come on, feel loose. Put your arms up, breathe, you're a tree. At that very moment, the guys from La M, the Mexican Mafia, came in. Now, the prison is segregated because the men segregate themselves. You had the Aryan Brotherhood, La M, the Black Guerrilla family. Nobody ever went to each other's section of the yard. If you did, you'd get stabbed. If somebody had a beat, you'd get stabbed. Everything was solved through violence. And the two guys who came in from La M had about 8 murders since they were in prison. Because they were doing life. What can you do? They killed somebody and were like, okay, give me some more time. They're saying, you want my license too? The two guys who came in, Tito and Raphael, toughest guys in the prison. They walk in and we all have the same thought. The guys from the Mexican Mafia have left their section of the yard and come up here. Who are they here to kill? And so I'm working with the guys. Not everybody wants to be cool because you can't show fear. So now my two guys are like, well, we all are looking out the corner of my eyes. My two big guys are going like, okay, Jamal, look, okay, look, I'm a tree. I got my arms up, I sway, I'm a palm tree. And I'm watching Tito, who's the leader of La M, out the corner of my eye. And he's getting madder and madder. And then after about 10 minutes, he gets up really angry. And he comes up to me and was like, yo, homie, can I speak to you a second? And I was like, damn, it's it. I knew doing plays was a bad idea. This is really it. And he pulls me to the side. And he's like, yo, S.A., there's no secrets here at Leavenworth Homes. We heard what you were doing, and I had to come see for myself. And I'm going to tell you something, S.A. I've been sitting here for about 10 minutes, and I've been watching. You listen to me, man. You listen to me good. That guy you're working with, S.A., that guy, that effing guy, yo, Holmes, he's not feeling his character. So I said, why don't you get in? And they were great, so we rewrote the play. Now the Black History Month play was a Black and Latino History Month play. The guys from the Aryan Brotherhood said, go see what the Blacks and Mexicans are doing. If they're teamed up, this couldn't be good for us. They said their toughest guy, his name was Red for Rebel, 6'3", 220 pounds, a black belt in Taekwondo. Red comes up to rehearsal. He comes back 2 hours later. All the guys in the yard surround him. Aryan Brotherhood, bikers, bank robbers, kidnappers. It's like, Red, you up there with the Blacks and Mexicans? Rep said, no. They said, Red, what's going on up there? Rep said, they doing a play. But what'd you do about it, Red? Rep said, well, they give me a part. We became our own section of the yard. And we became a reason why men who weren't talking to one another, who grew up hating one another, started communicating through the arts. So I do understand the power of arts and education. I do understand how we have to use moments like this to create a conversation that reignites a struggle. And I do understand that that struggle is complicated, but at the same time, very simple. I remember seeing a poster in the Panther office saying that at the risk of sounding ridiculous, it was Che Guevara, a speech he had given at the United Nations. At the risk of sounding ridiculous, let me say that revolutionaries are guided by great feelings of love. I submit to you that in the Panther Party, that it wasn't hate for the government that made us get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go across town when it was freezing to serve kids that weren't our kids. That it wasn't hate for anyone that made us open those health clinics, that made us work 16, 18 hours a day, that would make you get off the bus when you were tired, headed home, but you saw the police having someone hemmed up against the wall, and you would stop and get in between that cop and that person. Though you had never met them before, you understood that was your brother or your sister. It was love. And if you ask anyone who was in the movement, what really motivated you? What did you believe among all other things? Meet anyone that was in the Panther Party. And I guarantee, I'm telling you, I guarantee it, that they will answer the question that we were taught to have an undying love and to serve the people. And if we can have that undying love for humanity, for the brothers and sisters in your community and other communities to look at everyone, regardless to their age, to their race, to their gender, to the color of their skin, to their sexual preferences, and understand that I am not free till they are free, that I am not fed while they're hungry, that I do not have a home while they don't have shelter, that as long as someone is incarcerated, an assistant can build prisons while they shut down schools, that we have work to do. Whether it's just tutoring one person, whether it's feeding one person, whether it's giving a book to one person, we can make change. A young man goes out to a state fair with his family and he's having a great time. There's a Ferris wheel, there's ponies, there's cotton candy. But the thing that's really got this kid's attention is a guy who's giving away balloons. This old man just comes with his helium tank and he just hands out balloons. And there's so many kids trying to get these free balloons that a red balloon gets away and it floats up and up and up. And then after a few moments, a green balloon gets away and it floats up and up. And this little kid couldn't take it anymore. He kind of tears through the crowd and he pulls on this old man's leg and he said, "Mr. Balloon Man, did you see that? Did you see that? The green balloon went just as high as the red balloon." And that old man looked down at that little boy and he said, "Son, always remember this. It's not the color on the outside, but the stuff on the inside that will make you rise." Thank you so much. I really want to thank Safi for bringing me out. Safi Wula for bringing me out. I want to again thank the sponsoring organizations, the Friends of the City Library. Are there any friends in the house? Give them a round of applause. Yes. And welcome to University of American Studies for the University of Utah, which I've learned is called the U. Right on to the U. Let's give the U a round of applause. I've been through Salt Lake before as a filmmaker and someone at Columbia University. I've been through before, but the first time really feeling the energy, the diversity, and the real pleasure of what it is to be in Salt Lake City. So I thank you for your hospitality. Thank you so much.
Well, I stand before you a pasty Irish American, but I am so honored to be able to offer our deepest thanks and love to Dr. Joseph, and for all of you who have been here today to hear his inspiring words. And now the most important thing I can say is, let us go and change the world. We do have some thanks to give, and we can never thank our friends of the library enough. As a librarian, they put up with a lot from us to give you wonderful things. We also truly are grateful